So often I hear us have conversations about what should I do now? What is the best use of my time? Now that the team's operating, I've got leading hands on site, I've got a project team, I've got people in the office. How can I be an effective managing director? And I want to unpack that for us today. I want to talk about the different hats that we do have to wear and those responsibilities that we have. And then I also want to pull out some data points too for us to begin tracking. So these are going to be our company KPIs. And I want you to make them relative to your business, but I hope that this gives you a really good insight as to what some of these targets are and also the most frequent ones that I use as well. So I've got myself a little spreadsheet here today because I know that this is going to be a big one. And let's get stuck in and have a look firstly at our economic engine. So you would have seen this model before, and you would have obviously heard us talk about pipeline, people, and profit a lot as well. Now, as an effective managing director, this pipeline, people, and profit, it's easy to use these simplistic terms to diagnose the areas for concern or the areas of focus for the business. However, it's a little bit more detailed than that. And now that you do want to be this effective managing director, we actually have to look into areas that are a little bit more in depth. So if we take our pipeline area, it's actually two departments that sit in there, two hats that we need to wear. There's marketing and there's sales. When we're talking about people, there's two departments, there's operations and our team. And then when we're talking about strategy, when we're talking about profit, there is strategy and there's also finance. So with this in mind, that there's an extra layer of sophistication or an extra layer of detail, we're going to unpack how these different business departments affect you and what you should be doing to then become the effective managing director. So when we're talking about marketing, now that you have a lead generation engine, you've got word of mouth and you've also got some form of paid lead generation. Your role as the effective managing director now needs to be about sharing and spreading that brand awareness. So around branding, making sure that the brand does talk right directly to the customer that we want to work with, and also is positioned in a way where there's no devaluing, no discrediting. So if you're looking at your company name, for example, and your company logo, and you're like, that was fine when we were sole trading, and that's not fine for now. That's not fine for the vision and the company that we're going to have in the future. This is where now it's time to start digging into some of those areas. Also in the marketing area, we do need to focus on what the true lead generation engine is. So this is moving away from the cute stubby holders and some of the like little cookies and gifts and weird things that we've done that we don't track, that costs us money, that has got no return on investment. And we need to focus now on what is the true lead generation components. So in our marketing section, we have, or marketing department, we need to focus on brand and we need to focus on lead gen. There's two key areas, and we're going to pull out some data points after, but I just want to have an open conversation first about these. In our sales area, there's two real components that come into our sales. That's our sales process, which is usually around the estimating and quoting and the follow-up, and we've done a few workshops on those, so we have a good understanding of that. We've got our sales process, and then we also have our BDM or our network. Now that you are elevated, now the company is a little bit larger and there is some status involved, this network component does become quite important. Now, I'm not saying go out and join a BNI, not a chance. You have the credibility and you have the runs on the board to be able to leverage your network now. When we are looking at our operations, this is where we need to be able to delegate out site works. We need to delegate. We want to make sure that you're looking at the data of the projects, but you're not necessarily running the projects. Now, you may run major projects, but you do not need to run all the projects. If you want to be an effective managing director, you do need to have a projects team, and whatever capacity that could be. That could be your leading hands of small business units, that could be your project managers, that could be your site supervisor. But nonetheless, we need to have some delegation around our operations so that you are reporting on the data as opposed to doing. With our team, we have recruiting, we have onboarding, and we have training. 3 key areas. How are we going to find people to keep up with the growth trajectory of the company? How are we going to onboard them so that we can set the standard for them? And how are we going to train them and get them up to speed as fast as possible so that from day 1 or from day 30, they are completely effective in their role? This is a big area of focus for you if you're planning on scaling up your team and also scaling to multiple locations, is you need to have a framework in place to train these people, to not only rely on their apprenticeships training, but what about the training for our company and how our business operates? Then in the finance section, we're going to be thinking about leading our cash flow meetings, leading our finance meeting. We're also going to be frequently forecasting. So this is cash flow, a focus on cash flow, and a focus on forecast. Along with current company performance, obviously, but nonetheless, our attention needs to be on how are we managing our cash? Do we have enough cash in order to continue growing at the rate that we are growing? And then when we tie this back around to strategy, this is where we bring it all together and we do a governance meeting. And we're also going to bring in performance reviews as well, which is spoken about before. So when you're thinking about what is my newfound job role, you may be looking at some of this, some of these scenarios or some of these items here and think, fuck, I don't do any of this. This is what an effective managing director does. An effective managing director aligns the brand with where the company needs to go, and it ensures that you ensure the leads are there, that we are generating enough leads. Then we're refining our sales process to make sure that we're getting the leads in, but we're also converting them. We're also expanding our network and making sure that this word of mouth grows on steroids, and also we're positioning yourself as an industry leader and an industry expert. We have delegated the operational tasks so that we're fed details, not doing. We have a process in place where we can train, onboard, recruit, and train our team. We are measuring our cash flow and we're actively forecasting. And we can also bring all of this information together for our governance meeting and our performance reviews. Shall we dig in and look at some of these data points? How do we track our effectiveness out of this? So let's play a game. I'm going to run through marketing, sales, ops, team, finance as to what some of these data points could be or should be. Now, I want to preface this as well with use our examples, but tailor them to your specific business. So as we go through and we talk about lead generation, if you're working solely for builders, lead generation may not be the perfect measure, and the perfect measure may be number of quotes sent. Whereas if you're working directly with homeowners, lead generation and new leads in is going to be a highly important, a very important figure for you to track. So I'm going to make this broad enough for us all to be able to fill in the details for our specific business, but nonetheless, we're going to track out some KPIs. So if we call this our marketing KPIs, the most important piece for our marketing function, the absolute end goal for marketing is to send a quote. All of the effort we do, all of the ads, all of the lead gen, all of the outreach, everything that we do drives down to one singular goal, to send a quote. Remember, in our sales section, we're going to be going through how we actually win and close those quotes. But this is everything we do in our marketing drives to number of quotes sent. Now, there's a question here. You could do number of quotes sent, or you could also do dollar value of quotes sent. Now, the scenario we need to play out here is if we have now the purpose for our marketing function, what is the leading indicator for this? So I'm going to put a line down the middle here. I'm actually going to drag these guys over and put this in the center. And let's put a line down the middle. If you are doing B2B or B2C, business to business or business to consumer, if you're working for builders, you'll be on the left-hand side. If you work with homeowners, you'll be on the right-hand side. If you do both, you will be tracking both. So, B2B, number of quotes sent. What is the leading measure for us to be able to establish how many quotes are we getting in? This could be total number of new inquiries. Let's go number of inquiry. The reason I say inquiry and not lead for this purpose is because we don't want to track a new lead. We want an inquiry. So that would include requests for quotes. That would include return clients, anything of the sort. But we will be able to pull out now a leading measure and a lagging measure. If we have a certain number of inquiries and we have a certain number of quotes sent, we will be on track to be able to get our target. Now, on the B2C side, this is absolutely going to be along the lines of number of leads, because we don't have such a high volume of return clients. Our clients are actually coming from a number of leads. So there are also, today for the purpose of this as effective managing director, we are looking at top line KPIs. We absolutely acknowledge that there are more KPIs or more data points to track below this or inside this, but we want to pull out the top one or two that drive the business forward. And if we find that some of these KPIs, like if we're falling behind on our number of leads, we will then dig in and find out, was it to do with ad spend? Was it to do with cost per lead? We'll be able to diagnose based on whether we hit our target or not for these KPIs. Okay, we have our marketing. Now let's do sales. Two components I would have thought about for our sales, and because now that we have generated our quotes, it doesn't matter if you're B2B or B2C, we're going to drive them down into a singular area. As for our KPIs, what is the absolute leading measure that we want to track? I would say it would be number of quotes won. Because if we go back before, we've got number of quotes sent. If we divide number of quotes sent by number of quotes won, we will actually get a conversion ratio. Fantastic. Two good points to track. We can choose whether we want to do a comparison of number of quotes sent versus number of quotes won, or if we want to track a conversion ratio. Either way will get us to where we need to go. And second to this, I want us to track our average job value or average invoice value. This will help us see the effectiveness of our sales function. So if we are tracking our average job value and the company scales up and our average job value is going down, are we discounting? Are we talking to smaller clients? Did we change our service? What is causing us to spend more effort selling, spending more on marketing, generating more leads, but our average job value is going down? On the other side, it would be validating for our sales function to know that our average job value is increasing. That would say to us that our marketing efforts are doing well. They are talking to the right customer. We are generating more of the right leads. So there absolutely, again, are going to be some more detailed or further chunked down KPIs that sit within here. But for the purpose of this, we want to have our top line KPIs so that we can identify what happened. Is there a variance and should I go digging? Not dissimilar to when we were looking at our management report. We've got top line KPIs in there. And if we do find that there's a variance there, we can then dig in and find the answers and find the solutions to it. So we have our marketing and we have our sales. Now we have our ops. What is the core piece as we scale up our business? What is the core KPI that we want to track to ensure that our operations are running smoothly? Now I'm going to go ahead and throw two up here. These are the two that almost all companies that I work with are tracking. Yes, different businesses will have slightly different marketing and sales KPIs. However, operations tends to be very similar and heavily focused around gross profit margin as our first, and our second is customer satisfaction. However, we measure that customer satisfaction. If we're doing home services, then our Google reviews is a fantastic way to measure our customer satisfaction. If we're working for residential or commercial builders or other commercial clients, we could bring in a job completion phone call that we self-diagnose or we self-analyze what the response is. Now, one that we've used previously, we know that we send a survey through to builders and they just won't do it. And we acknowledge that very early on. However, our project management team in Build Clean, they do call up every project once it's complete, just to get that, that sign off, that final piece of the relationship. How did the project go? And there's 4 or 5 measures that we are testing their response. So if their response is, yep, absolutely fantastic, and there's no ifs or buts about it, they get scored 100%. They self-analyze. The project manager notes that down. If they speak to the client and it was great, but, and there's only one component, that's 75%. If it was, yeah, okay, it was this and that and this, they get 50%. If it was, and a whole range of different defects, they get 25%. And if they are too scared to call the client back, they get a 0%. This is how we measure customer satisfaction in the circumstance that it is too hard or too difficult to get a proper response from a survey or from an automated process. We had to bring in a manual system in order to overcome that. So they're the 2 components. And the reason we're tracking those, gross profit, to make sure that as revenue scales up, our team is still marginally just as efficient. Our pricing is still on point. For our customer satisfaction, as our revenue scales up, we don't want our revenue to scale up, but also people to dislike us because there'll be a bad credibility to our brand. We want to make sure that our customer satisfaction remains the same or increases as revenue grows. That way, the more work we do, the more happy people are. We're just as efficient. This is a model to scale. Cool. Let's move on. We're now moving to team. The team can be measured in a couple of areas depending on your desired outcome. So if you are scaling hard, you're growing fast, and you have a large requirement of people. So if you are going to be recruiting at least one person every 2 months, then the first component that we would want to have is a recruiting calendar. And what this would be as far as a target goes is we've got month 1, we've got month 2, we've got month 3, and in month 1 we might have a qualified, in month 2 we might have nil, in month 3 we might need an apprentice. That's how kind of the scoreboard would work, or the KPI would work for a recruiting calendar. Secondly to that, as we're saying with this example, if this is a large team and a growing team, we also want to record employee satisfaction. That's going to be an internal survey. The frequency that's best used for this is probably monthly. I do see some guys doing it weekly, which is fantastic for fast feedback. If we can get into the habit of that, that would be great. But we want to make sure that as the team grows, we get constant feedback from them outside of their performance reviews in an area that is private, so that the employees feel like they can talk about exactly what is going on. We want to make sure that as the team is growing, the team is scaling up, that nobody gets overlooked, and we don't have any snakes in the hen house. We don't have any bad people coming along for the ride, or any issues that are beginning to bubble over that we would otherwise need to know about quickly. And the final piece for our KPIs, we have our finance. Now, back from our management report, we had a whole range of data points that were in there. But to keep things as simple as possible, in our finance area, there are a couple KPIs that we want to track. We want to track our revenue target for the period. We want to track our net profit target for the period. They are the top and the bottom line figures. That is absolutely the most important. The only other time that I would add a third KPI in is if you were going to track OPEX. But for the purpose of keeping this simple and keeping things concise, I would just stress for you to run, as far as your KPIs for the finance function, your revenue target, and your net profit target and add layers of complexity afterwards. Now, we did say as well, the sixth component or the sixth piece that sits in our economic engine is strategy. Strategy, if we go back to have a look at our economic engine, and I'm going to get the eraser out and I'm going to drop all of these out to make this just a little bit easier on the eyes. When we are thinking about our strategy, strategy in one component can be dictated as our mission, which summarizes the whole lot. It summarizes everything together. There is a chunked down version as well, where each of these different departments has its own strategic plan. And we get to those when we talk about business planning. But if we are to go back down and we're to look at how we're going to draw out our strategic KPIs, this is where we are aligning everything with our mission. And as we know, our mission is revenue goal by net profit margin at end of financial year. That is how we structure our missions here. And that's the guiding northern star that we are working towards. So I know that it was quite a serious one today, and it did take a double espresso to get through. However, for us to be able to be a managing director, an effective managing director, we do need to give ourselves permission to not have to be on site all the time, to not have to, wear our steel toe boots all the time. A big line in the sand here is when you can wear, RMs and chinos, because you're saying not only to the team that you're not going to be there to save the day, you're not going to be jumping or dropping what you're doing. It also says to yourself that your highest and best use is in the office and driving the company forward. So let's take out some of these KPIs. Let's draw them even on your whiteboard. Let's start to track some of these data points. And this is going to then identify for you, where should you work within the company? Where is the most important avenue or department that you should be focusing on for the month? So if we're to recap some of those targets, if revenue target is not being achieved, if we're unable to achieve our revenue target, let's go back to the very start and say, is there enough deal flow coming through? Do we have enough leads? Are we doing enough outbound? If we can validate, yes, we've got plenty coming in, but our sales conversion rate, we only win 1 in 10 quotes. Well, if we were to win half of the quotes, if we were to win 50% of the quotes, 5 in 10, then we would be able to not change our marketing function, focus on our sales function, drive that, improve that, and that would then top up that revenue. That would get that revenue to where it needs to be. So let's have a look. Let's draw out some of these data points and start to hold some space for yourself to analyze what is happening within the company. Where are the areas that you should put your highest and best use? And then start to improve those areas. As soon as we can track it, then we can start improving them.